Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Life Cycle of a Young Entrepreneur. Before we get started, I wanted to thank our sponsors, P&G Ventures, Kroger, First Financial, North American Properties, Fora Ventures, Taft, and KMK. This would not be possible without them. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please continue to use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions. A recorded version of today's webinar will be provided. And please continue to fill out that little survey that pops up at the end of this webinar. Thank you all so much for attending. Now I'm going to hand it off to Francisco and Ian to get us started.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining. Francisco and I are very excited to present to you a little bit about Centrifuge, a little bit about, I guess, the life cycle of a young entrepreneur in the sense of where people approaching college could get involved within the tech ecosystem, different career paths that we could go into, and a little bit of background on what our core day-to-day is like at Centrifuge here. So I'm Ian Frampton, and I'll hand it over to Francisco for a second.
Great. Hey everyone, Francisco Gomez here. I'm the associate on the fund team, and yeah, I just wanted to second Ian's sentiment so far. Basically, what we're going to be covering today is just how you can think about different, internships and career paths as you develop from kind of the point that you are now to, potentially becoming an investor, potentially becoming an entrepreneur, an employee at a tech company, and so on. The ecosystem is definitely pretty interesting and diverse. So we'll cover some of that, and then Ian and I have some pretty interesting just day-to-day core functions that we want to share with you. So I guess I'll go ahead and I'll kick off introductions for us. So again, I'm Francisco Gomez. I'm the associate on the fund team, and I joined Centrifuge about 14 to 15 months ago. I started on the team as the analyst, and basically what I did there was I worked on a lot of our financial reporting, a lot of our due diligence process, talking to different fund managers. And then late last year, I was promoted to associate and kind of grew the scope of my role to include a few other operational tasks that go into helping run the fund. Prior to joining Centrifuge, I worked at Fifth Third Bank in a finance role. And then prior to that, I went to Miami University just up the road here, and graduated with a bachelor's in finance. During my time at Miami, I had a few different internships with a few large corporations in finance, and then with Intel Capital, which is the venture capital arm of Intel Corporation, more in the venture and investing space. I'll go a little bit deeper into my background when we get to the potential career path section, but that's a little bit about me, and I'll hand it off to Ian for another intro.
Thanks, Francisco. Hey everyone. So again, Ian Frampton. So I've been with Centrifuge and the fund for close to 4 years now. My role is similar to Francisco's trajectory. I started out as a pure play analyst here at the fund, where a lot of my day-to-day was around deal sourcing, due diligence, pipeline building, a lot of financial projections and back-end operations for the fund, just day-to-day operations within that. Since then, and since we've kind of progressed into a more formalized strategy through our fund 2, which we can get into a little more detail in the coming slides, my role is transformed into somewhat of kind of what I'd consider a business development and platform role, where I work really closely with our venture funds that we're investing into, along with the underlying startups in those portfolios, to assess and better understand where technologies can kind of plug in and play with our corporations that we work with closely. And I'm sure some of you or all of you have heard from a few of them during some of these webinar series. So we work really closely with people like P&G and Kroger, Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So I work day to day with a lot of people on those functional teams to find ways to implement new technologies and new startups within those roles. Previously to Centrifuge, I went to undergrad at the University of Cincinnati here. I double majored in economics and international business. I found my way into kind of the tech world and venture ecosystem through an internship I had when I was studying abroad in Shanghai. I was working for a really small startup team over there, and I can get more into detail of how I kind of went down that path later on, but that's kind of what drew me into this space. But from here, Francisco, if you had any other last words, I can kind of dive into Centrifuge overview for everyone, what we are doing as a whole, and kind of dive into the fund as a core. So to go over Centrifuge quickly, so and the fund specifically, we are a strategic fund of funds. So what a fund of funds is a financial vehicle for us to invest into venture capital funds, and we do so that across a couple different avenues and with 3 different structures for strategy. One is around financial performance. So we're what we consider a fiduciary. So we are responsible to facilitate other people's money. So that's where we, P&G and Kroger, and you see on the bottom right there, Western and Southern, Great American, and Children's provide us capital to go out and invest on their behalf. So we are looking for, first and foremost, investing in funds that can return capital, that are top name funds within the venture ecosystem, that kind of have long-standing track records and really good networks and teams to be going out and investing in really risky investments in startups. The other aspect of our fund is a strategic aspect, and that's kind of where we emphasize strategic on this slide. So a lot of our work, and what my work is around finding technologies that fit with our corporation. So we also want to make sure we're investing into funds that have a good fit with our corporate's needs. So we're finding alignment and types of technologies to be doing that. So we're investing across a gambit of industries. So that's anywhere from business to business type of relationships to direct consumer relationships, different types of technologies that our corporations would be interested in. And the third aspect is around kind of the Cincinnati region engagement. So we look for ways to bring in new risk capital, new venture dollars into the Cincinnati region, because what we found when we went out and created Centrifuge was we really wanted to build a vibrant tech ecosystem. And by doing so, we needed to bring in outside talent to help source, to help build and scale companies within the Cincinnati region that might have been overlooked. If you guys have heard of kind of the Midwest rhetoric of people really only deploy capital on the coast, we wanted to ensure that we were providing access to our funds and our startups, new technology within the space. So those are kind of the 3 aspects we touch on as a fund of funds. And I can kind of go into the next piece, kind of diving into what we're solving for. So this is kind of touching on the strategic aspect of, these are just a couple use cases of what we're looking for. So potentially Kroger might be interested in food retail. How can we help solve that? We will go out and find funds and startups that are solving that technology. So one was around how could Kroger reduce food waste and pursue a zero hunger, zero waste initiative. There's a company in our portfolio called Appeal Sciences. That's a really cool technology. And what they do is they provide an edible cohesive layer on top of fruits. They started with avocados, and their whole main purpose was to ensure shelf life for a longer time, in store and at home. So if you guys are familiar and frustrated like I am, avocados always go bad. So Appeal Sciences helps mitigate that, which in turn reduces food waste in store and reduces food waste at home. So they're right now, they tested on avocados, but now they're scaling nationwide to all the Kroger stores, and they're working on different other products. I think they're working on lemons and limes, and they're also starting to scale into edible skins. So I think like peaches. So it's a really good evolution for how we can help with finding solutions and problems and kind of combining the two. And the other 2 roughly are kind of industrial manufacturing. One was a lot of technology today is trying to help automate and make things more efficient across supply chain, for example. So industrial manufacturing, there's companies like Soft Robotics, which is a really cool technology out of one of our funds. And it basically mimics the human hand with a silicon robot hand to, at high speed and high volume, pick up fruits, pick up different types of things that robotic hands might necessarily crush, that might kind of damage different products. So they work on really soft products like laundry detergent, fruits, things like that. And it helps save costs on the bottom line for people that are working in industrial manufacturing. So those are kind of just example opportunity areas that we are trying to solve. And there's hundreds of others that we work with daily across our corporations, but just wanted to provide a little bit of insight on that. Francisco, if you had anything to add there, please chime in. But
yeah, no, that did a great job of covering it. But the one thing that I would add is, as strategic investors, I feel like one of the most important and one of the most difficult things that we do is balancing that financial performance piece that Ian was talking about with also this kind of strategic alignment piece. And that's where you can see where Ian and I's roles kind of match up. I do a lot of work on the fund, just on the fund side, and then Ian does a lot of work with our investors, and then also with the funds. And then those two kind of come together to really form the general holistic impact that Centrifuge creates. And you'll see on the next slide that to be able to create these impacts, like these relationships with Appeal Science and with soft robotics, we really have to leverage a network that Centrifuge has been building for several years across the entire country.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Francisco. And that's one of the reasons we're able to get some of, you might not all be familiar with some of these venture funds. It's kind of a niche industry. But a lot of these venture funds on this slide here are top brand name funds that we consider oversubscribed. And what oversubscribed means is these funds have to turn away dollars. So that they are not taking everyone's money. Everyone is trying to throw money at these funds because they want access to their high returns. And we're able to kind of get into some of these funds either by entry check or by long-standing relationships because of what Francisco talked about around our strategic fit. So it's kind of a nice flywheel effect where we're investing in funds with a strategic aim to get their startups in front of our corporations, which in turn helps the startups increase their profitability, their valuations, gain more business development and customers directly through us as us being navigators. So that's one of the really hard parts about our job is kind of the business development line, where if you try and go into a huge behemoth like a P&G, it is very hard to find a good entry point. And that's one of the main roles that we can play at Centrifuge is being that kind of Sherpa to help them find the right people to talk to, making sure it's the right time, they have a right approach. And that's a lot of my work as well, is helping prep some of these startups and funds to find angles into some of these doors for long-standing relationships and pilots and partnerships.
Yeah. And one more point on this slide, you can see, so the kind of blue circles are areas where we have investments, and then the grayish black dots are kind of network funds. And you can see there are a significant amount more of network funds than investments that we've actually made. And we're going to kind of dive into that in the career path section, but the venture and kind of technology sphere is very network and relationship driven. So, I would say that we talk to 100+ funds in a year, and then, out of those, how many get investments? It's a very, very small amount. But then even if you don't make an investment, you continue to monitor and leverage that relationship in the future, and kind of a give-take relationship. You give them access to some of these corporations and potential, sources of innovation. And then they also feed, startups and different ideas and different companies back to you. So it's a big part of what we do as a team to make sure that we continue to kind of nurture this network, even with funds that we're not investors in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and I mean, at our core, we are working in finance. We are handling people's money, but a large aspect of what we do and how we're successful in deploying this capital is by building relationships and building networks. So for us to be able to understand that a relationship takes two pieces of not just taking, but also giving and providing. I think that's one of the bigger learning points that I've found in this job. for one, maintaining such a large network and making sure we're providing value to people out there as well from our positions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so if we're good there, we can go to the next section, Ian.
That's perfect. Yeah, so I will hand off to Francisco and we'll all both jump in here, but to talk around somewhat of career paths on becoming investors or entrepreneurs in this space.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about just potential career paths and kind of how to break into the industry. Ian and I have, talked about this a few times in the past. The industry is all kind of guided by what people call warm introductions, where a kind of a connection between the two of you makes an introduction, and you kind of get a foot in the door that way. But there are several different ways, especially now with so many just technology mediums between Twitter and Medium and LinkedIn and so on, that you can really just try to engage and get your foot in the door. So we want to talk about just a few general suggestions on how to work towards getting a role, and then a few suggestions on what internship possibilities you guys could look at for the best kind of curated alignment towards getting a job in tech or in venture. So we can go to the awesome. Thanks, Ian. So I'd say that when you're thinking about how to get a job in venture or kind of the big blue chip technology companies of like Apple or Google or Facebook, there is no predetermined path. But below, you're going to see a few points that I'll walk through that I've seen be the most successful for myself, and then for people like Ian, and for people in my network that not only work in venture but work at these large technology corporations. So I would say one of the top ones is making sure that you're engaged with the startup community around you, and with organizations and individuals that you think you have the most alignment with, or that what they're doing at their company or at their investment fund is most interesting to you. In the past, this has been quite difficult to do, but now, as I was mentioning, with everybody kind of hosting virtual platforms, such as what we're doing now, or people being very, very active on Twitter, very active on LinkedIn, very active through Medium posts, I think it's easier than it has been in the past to make sure that you're engaged and present and top of mind for these investors or entrepreneurs or tech companies that you really feel that you respect what they're doing and you want to be involved. I would say the number one thing is making sure that you're engaged and knowledgeable on what they're doing, and really just displaying interest. I feel like just following somebody on Twitter or being up to date with different articles that they've written goes a long way in showing your interest, and ultimately that sort of engagement really brings you to the top of the heap when people start to think about who's in their network. If you're consistently active, that'll definitely keep you present and top of mind. Second, I'd say building your network. I alluded to that in the first section, but there's a very, very strong community within the technology sector, within entrepreneurship, and within venture. So as I was mentioning, there's a significant advantage to having a warm introduction, where if I happen to know somebody like Ian, Ian could introduce me to numerous corporations, then to a almost endless amount of funds, and several different startups. So making sure that you can really put time and care into building those relationships and building that network will kind of give you the inside track to being the first to hear about a potential internship, or a potential kind of summer fellowship or full-time position. But one of the things that I really wanted to highlight is that always remember that when you're building a network of mentors or peers, or kind of whatever phase of development that you're at, the relationships there have to be a give and take relationship. A lot of mentor-mentee relationships are often, one-sided. But if you happen to have a mentor that's an entrepreneur in a certain sector, right? When you meet with them, try to find something interesting that's going on in that sector, or a company that's doing something similar, or an interesting technology development that you could share that maybe they haven't heard of, or that maybe could be helpful to them. I think just having that kind of focus on give from your end is a huge factor. Third, I would say, when there kind of is no clear path, try your best to just find a way. When you talk to people, even on our team here at Centrifuge, Ian and I have very different backgrounds, and then our fund manager, Sarah, has a different background than we do. So, three people that are ultimately working towards the same goal in the same organization on the same team, kind of all came from different paths. There is no, straight shot into being in venture or being in technology or being an entrepreneur. I really think it's about making sure that you curate the experiences that you're having towards being, in a certain position, and just making sure that you keep focus, and that you keep being persistent towards working towards that. And then that kind of segues into the last point, that just keep working and stay patient. I feel like not everybody makes it to be an entrepreneur, not everybody makes it to be in venture, not everybody works in technology. But just because maybe it doesn't happen for you at the first go around, doesn't mean that it won't happen for you. A good example of that is I started my internships in more kind of normal finance roles, where a lot of what you're doing is in-depth financial modeling, and kind of building and maintaining models and understanding, large manufacturing businesses. I started working at General Electric, and then I worked at a few other large international corporations. But kind of I made sure to curate all of the experiences that I had been having, so that I understood how investing worked. I understood kind of the general sense of entrepreneurialism and the developments within the technology industry. And then when the opportunity presented itself to join an organization like Centrifuge, I had curated experiences in the past, and I had the network to kind of introduce me, and that gave me the opportunity to go into venture. So it's not always kind of the first landing spot, but if that is the ultimate goal for you, or if it's working at a technology company, or if it's starting your own company and being a pure entrepreneur, always make sure that the experiences that you're curating are building you up towards that ultimate goal. And I don't know if you have anything to add there, Ian, or if you want to go into some of your experiences.
No, those are really good points. I think to your point, Francisco, around making sure you understand what you're getting into. I've seen this a lot of people will ask me or think that venture capital is a really cool industry, and they just want to work in venture capital because they think it's really cool. They see it on TV, or they hear about it in the news, and they think it's just really sleek looking. But it is really important to ask yourself, what core values drive you to be successful and to be productive in your job? So for me, what provides me a lot of what kind of wakes me up every morning is knowing that I am helping other individuals pursue their goals and dreams. These people are putting everything on the line to be entrepreneurs. Some of them quit their jobs. Some of them have not had a paycheck for years, and they're trying to build technologies or companies that they truly believe in. And our role to be able to help facilitate and get some of that technology in front of potential partners, basically pieces for them to continue building their business, is what really drives me to work in this world that we're in. And so I think I ask everyone here to really think about and even write down what are your core values, what you believe drives you in career paths, and what even just some really loose interests. whether that's really broad helping people, whether you're driven by making money. It's very okay if that's what drives you. There's tons of things that drive different people, and I think it's best for you to find what that is. And when you find that, you'll be able to be the most productive you can be, and probably be the most happy you would be in a job situation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I can talk on, I don't know if the next slide here goes, I can talk on maybe my background a little bit, Francisco, or should I wait for the next piece?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Okay.
And then we can dive into the next slide.
Yeah. So so to Francisco's point, we all kind of have different backgrounds, right? And I think that's one of the beauties about just working in general. Everyone comes from different industries and different backgrounds and comes together to define a mission like Centrifuge is doing. That's why I think our team works really well, because we bring different things to the table. But what I alluded to at the beginning, my entry point into this space was really kind of happenstance, and me just kind of saying yes to a few opportunities that I didn't think would go a whole lot of places. So I started taking entrepreneurship classes. I started studying, I decided to go study abroad and get involved with some of the tech ecosystem in that region. And I thought that was a really cool learning experience. My professor helped push me, and I just built relationships with some of my professors. And I think it's really important as you guys are progressing, potentially, if you are going to college, to make sure you hold relationships with some of your professors as the early stages of building a network, like Francisco is talking about, because that's what kind of brought me into the doorway of working at a smaller tech company and just interning there and really seeing what it's like to help build something from the ground up, even if it's really remedial tasks and really just entry level stuff. It was really great to see what a young company can do, working with a CEO and a CTO and another intern, of just really working on strategy and things like that. Then kind of came back to Cincinnati, started what Francisco was talking about, of just reaching out to firms, different places that I thought would align with my interests once I graduated college and what I thought I was best fit for with my schooling, and kind of just cold applied to Centrifuge and started out as an intern and worked my way up in that sense. So I think it's tons of different ways. And to bullet number 3, find a way. There might not be the first step, but I always try and plan out where I'd like to be in maybe 2 to 3 steps and work towards that to help build and mold and find aspects of work that I don't like and understand that I do not want to go that way, and find aspects of work that I do enjoy, and really emphasize a lot of that. So being able to find and touch on those things in your early career is really important, so you can really find out what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we can go through this slide, and then I noticed there are a few questions in the Q&A section. So after this slide, we'll stop and answer some of those. So specifically for you guys and kind of the point that you're at right now, when you're thinking about the future, whether it's going to college or potential internships, really what you want to be doing is kind of what we were talking about before, building the skills that will allow you to become an entrepreneur and build your own company and your own brand, or work at a tech corporation, or work as an investor. And Ian and I kind of work together to think about the most typical experiences. And as we mentioned, there is no direct path. But as you talk to different people that are entrepreneurs, or that work in tech, or that work in venture, these are kind of 5 pretty consistent overlapping points. So you can start off in finance at a small, medium, or large institution. And basically the main point there is make sure that you're developing strong Excel and financial modeling experience. And personally, what I can say is a lot of finance work is sometimes more static thinking of kind of from point A to point B. Make sure that you're really pushing yourself to think like in a dynamic way, to make sure that you can pivot. And it's important, if you're an investor and also if you're an entrepreneur, to just think about how many different ways you can use to get from point A to point B, and kind of the different tools that you can leverage, and really just make sure that you're dynamic in your thinking. Investment banking is a fairly typical track that really builds out a strong base of financial modeling, and also gives you experience on specifically investment transactions. So that's a very typical route that people then take into, private equity or venture experiences. And then consulting is also a great route there. It provides you with a wide array of experiences. A lot of times consulting firms have many different arms, all the way from HR to people that analyze valuations of startups to people that develop strategy for large corporations. It's can really give you varied experience, and it really provides great name recognition on your resume. And those are more so focused towards being an investor. But if you want to be an entrepreneur or work in work at a tech corporation, we would say, get a role with a startup, right? Go and do a marketing role, go and do a finance role, or as Ian said, kind of go be a jack of all trades and kind of do whatever they throw at you, right? Working at a startup will teach you what it takes to be an entrepreneur, right? When you see an entrepreneur firsthand, as Ian said, kind of with everything on the line, just working and doing whatever it takes to make their company work. I think it'll really give you a lot of exposure into not only what you enjoy doing, but also just what being an entrepreneur really is and what it really takes. I think that would be super, super helpful as you kind of build yourself up to then, start your own venture. And then also working at a large tech corporation, so Intel, Google, Apple, Facebook, and so on. These large corporations will really give you a lot of insight into what the technology ecosystem looks like. And not only will you build skills and kind of ecosystem knowledge, but then as you look towards working at a startup or trying to work at a venture firm, these large tech corporations really bring kind of a lot of brand recognition to your experience and to your resumes. And that could be super helpful. So I don't know if you have anything to add there, Ian.
Yeah, I think those are really good laid out career paths for someone just entering college, getting out of high school, and just what to think about, and maybe do some research on what some of these would be. There's some free classes you could take. I know I've taken some that just kind of understand what some of this is, maybe some 101 classes to that extent. One I would add that we didn't add to this, but I think Francisco, you even touched on this a little bit in your background, but there are a lot of large corporations that you can join straight out of college that do things called development programs. And that really touches on a couple of different aspects. And I can, Francisco, if you want to talk about it too, because you went through it a little bit at one of your previous roles, but it really goes into different avenues of work within that corporation for a certain amount of time. So typically they're 2-year rotations. So you get a full swath of maybe finance, operations, accounting, business development. So you get to touch all of these different palettes within a corporation that could translate into more of the tech world. But Francisco, if you want to talk on that a little bit at length, I think that's an interesting concept if you really want to get an understanding for how a corporation works and how different structures work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was in a leadership development program at Fifth Third Bank, and basically what that is, it's a 2-year program where you have 4 different jobs. So you have a new job every 6 months that all kind of align with your general area of interest. So for me, it was finance. But you really get to kind of test the waters of within finance. There are thousands of different routes that you can go. Which route is the route that you see yourself in? You get to work with different managers, you get to work with different teams, and you really just get to learn a lot about the organization that you're at, but also yourself, right? I feel like through kind of the later years of high school, college, and then the early years of your career, you're learning a lot about what you like and what you don't like, right? And I feel like people don't touch on that enough. If you have an experience that kind of teaches you, hey, I don't think that's the right route for me, that's equally as valuable or maybe even more valuable than an experience that, you absolutely loved, because you're kind of building your repository of experiences and understanding the different routes that are possible and the different routes that you want to take, right? So early on in your career, as long as you're being thoughtful about the decisions that you're making and you're getting a lot of learnings and a lot of, just understanding of different organizations and different roles, I think everything is additive. And as Ian mentioned, kind of those leadership programs that a lot of different corporations offer give you a shorter term view into what each different role could potentially be for you. So as you kind of think about internships and then beyond, that's definitely something to keep in mind. So we can transition to some Q&A here. Zand was asking if there are any organizations that we would recommend joining or subscribing to in venture and tech to get connected. I would say that as far as kind of subscribing to within venture and within tech, there are so many newsletters across a bunch of different mediums and podcasts that are even on Spotify that can really just give you an intro into what VC is and how people think about that. Like a good one that I pretty consistently listen to on Spotify is called 20 Minute VC. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Ian.
Yeah, no, I think consuming podcasts, newsletters, even Twitter feeds is a really good way to understand it kind of at the front lines what people are showcasing and what people are providing as insight as they go through learned experiences. So I think I listen to a lot of Andreessen Horowitz. They have a great podcast. Andreessen Horowitz is, I think, industry standard, one of the better VC funds that has been created. They're really brand name in that sense. They hire some of the best partners that they can, and a lot of them are very insightful in what they do. A lot of them have run several public companies. So I view to them as a lot of learning capabilities on my end to kind of get an insight into what they're doing. And maybe we could provide Zand after this kind of a follow-up, maybe a list of a couple of newsletters that we subscribe to, and we would be able to distribute that to this group here that we find valuable, that we maybe read daily or weekly in that sense.
Yeah, agreed. And then as far as organizations that you can join, as you think about kind of the transition to college, a lot of colleges have kind of student-run venture funds or student-run technology clubs or entrepreneurship programs. So I would say that kind of at this point, those would be the best organizations to plug yourself into and to make sure that you're a part of, just so that you get exposure into what is entrepreneurialism, what is venture, and just the initiative to be a part of a program like this kind of shows that you guys would lean towards involvement in that in college. And then if your college doesn't have an organization around what you're interested in, I guarantee you that there are others that share a similar interest to you and go about different paths of maybe building that organization. I saw that happen at Miami with a impact investment fund that was student led. But I think those organizations kind of loop you in with people that have similar interests, and they typically have a lot of mentorships that they leverage to really continue to build your knowledge base.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And to that, for organizations to get involved, one that I found really valuable, I believe finding like-minded people is very important, but also doing it across multidisciplinary aspects. So if you're studying finance, go hang out with people in the computer lab that are working in coding. Find programs that bring those types of people together, maybe people from industrial design, maybe people that are doing computer science and people from finance together. Those are the really good entrepreneurship programs that I've seen work out really well. And that's kind of the strategy for some of the larger, bigger name colleges that are leading in these spaces as well. So I find that to be really valuable as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that that kind of hit on your question, Noah, around how do we stay up to date with what's happening in the startup community. We'll be able to share out some things we follow and stay up to date with. And then this last question from Zand around Lear Hippo. So looks like one of the principals will be, which is great. She's very smart and sharp in this space, to be one of the judges on the pitch competition. And we can provide some background on Lear Hippo and the relationship with them. So we've been investors in Lear Hippo, gosh, through I believe three of their funds now. So it's been a long-standing relationship with Lear, and what they are kind of what I consider the leading seed stage consumer fund in New York City. So they see a lot of great products. They understand how to build a brand. They've been investors in companies like Giphy, if you're familiar with it, investors in Glossier, the makeup company, investors in Casper, the mattress company, I believe Soylent, a bunch of other consumer companies. So they really understand what drives consumer behavior and what to invest in next. So they'll be able to provide tons of great insight, and we work with them closely on their investing, and then also connecting them to our corporations.
Yeah, and just a minor build on that. It's, you know, prior to starting to think about venture and about entrepreneurialism, it's interesting how many brands you see, you know, in your day-to-day life. Like there's a Casper store, you know, probably in a mall near you. And it's interesting to think that that's a, you know, a venture-backed company that then, you know, has subsequent investors, and there's a lot of interesting layers to that that I just hadn't thought of, and I hadn't had exposure to until I started to, you know, think about entrepreneurialism and about venture and about how, you know, the whole ecosystem and kind of life cycle of a company works. So it was just great that Ian brought up those, you know, kind of household names. I'm sure everybody on, you know, the webinar has used Giphy. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, that a lot of these, you know, a lot of these entrepreneurs are building what are now becoming really strong household brands.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have about 15 minutes left, so we're gonna jump into kind of some of our core work at day to day and what we do, as well as provide a little insight on what venture capital is. We keep saying these words, and we want to make sure at least give you an insight onto maybe where to lead you to go learn more, and maybe some stories to follow that, and along with some of the work we do day to day. So at its core, so venture capital as an overview. So VC is, I guess we could call it an investment into privately held kind of high growth early stage companies. So what that means is, if it is a very risky, high risk, high return asset class, investing into very early stage companies. So sometimes VCs are investing into companies that might just have an idea, might just be a pitch deck. So these are people investing into other people essentially. So there's not a whole lot of financial track record. And that's why you see the typical holding for some of these investments can be trajectory of 10 plus years, because it takes that long for a company to really get its feet and to stand up and to really find success and find place in the market. So typically VCs at a core structure are run by general partners. Those are the people leading the funds, who go out and raise money from LPs, and Centrifuge is considered an LP. So think of us as an LP giving money to the general partner, and then the general partner is then giving money to the startup to go out and build the company. So there's a couple tiers in this sense, and even Centrifuge, we have LPs, so it's even more tiered in that sense. So it's kind of confusing on the actual structure of a partnership, but there's tons of literature on it that can kind of help concise and bring it down. But venture capital has been around for a while too. So I think early days, even before this, I think technically it started in 1946 in Boston, Massachusetts, out of Harvard and MIT labs. That was some kind of the first venture capital type of dollars and investing to come through, and it really got its legs in Silicon Valley in the late 1950s. Really going through investing into hardware, semiconductors, and other computer and medical type of technologies. And from there, Silicon Valley, and I'm sure as you guys know, there's a TV show on it now. There's tons of different things and literature about Sand Hill Road, Menlo Park, and this is where a lot of people gravitated towards to go out and invest in some of these really risky, crazy business ideas that you wouldn't think would be successful, but the high risk, high reward obviously pays off. And to jump forward to today, the venture industry kind of has expanded drastically in that sense. A little dated, but since 2017, there's over 1,500 venture funds. I believe now there's, oh gosh, there has to be at least 3,000 or so venture funds across the U.S. now. And these deal numbers are continuing to go up because people are seeing value in going out and creating companies and going out and investing into these startups. So kind of to the last point, with more venture funds and startups more than ever, the competition for good deals has really skyrocketed, and there's a lot of competition between venture funds to go out and get into that Casper, get into that Giphy type of company, because there are startups now that are turning away dollars, turning away VCs because they need to make sure that they're taking the right money at the right time. Because if you go up to point number one, this is a really long relationship. This is a 10-year plus relationship that you are having and taking money from someone. So you need to be very thoughtful as an entrepreneur, as an LP, as a VC, when exchanging money that can be tied up for this long, because there has to be a lot of due diligence that goes into it that we'll get into later. And it just need to be very thoughtful in that sense. If there's anything you want to add here, Francisco, on kind of venture capital as a whole, there's tons of other writings, tons of other overviews that are out there, but we just wanted to provide a really high level of what VC is.
Yeah, no, the show Silicon Valley is eerily accurate, but it's a fun watch. And the only thing I would add is kind of as you think about, developing mentorships and internships and, just the relationships in general that you're building, keep in mind that point that Ian just made of being careful, kind of on both sides, that you're building the right experiences, you're partnering with the right mentors and the right, internships and corporations. Again, kind of tying back to what we were saying earlier in the, basically just in the presentation, is, you have a goal or a line of sight to, what you want to be or what you want to do, and make sure that you're partnering with the right people to get there, right? Venture is a lot of making sure that you're partnering with the right entrepreneurs as an investor, but as an entrepreneur, making sure that you're partnering with an investor that believes in your vision, and that really wants to make sure that you continue to head in that direction in the best way possible.
Yeah. I'm gonna jump through some of this quickly. So this is a good insight on venture capital investment timeline. So I will just go over this roughly. There's a couple other slides after this that we can run through, but this broadly is the timeline from contact phase, which is what we consider deal sourcing, which Francisco will dive into or later, and then all the way through negotiation to cash in the bank. So a lot of this, when we talk about it, there's a lot of diligence that goes into this, and but it's all done within roughly a couple months to sometimes a year time frame of building a relationship, getting into a deal, going through due diligence, understanding the business plan, doing background checks, doing a lot of back checking and back calling, making sure that everything is ticked and tied, that this is a good fit on both ends for the entrepreneur and the person writing the check, for a long-standing successful relationship, hopefully. To come, one of the high risky pieces here, up to 90% of investment proposals fail in this space within kind of the contact phase to the rough analysis phase. So when you think of a pipeline, a VC fund maybe sees, gosh, thousands of companies, thousands of deals come across their desk a year, and they're really only building a portfolio of maybe 20 to 25 investments over their whole fund. So a fund's investment period is roughly between 4 to 5 years. So they have 4 to 5 years to deploy all of their capital into maybe 20 to 25 startups. So that's why these investment timeline is so crucial. And that's why venture is such an interesting space at the early stage, because you are really investing in people and what they're driving towards, So like I mentioned earlier, there's not a whole lot of financial due diligence to go through in at least the seed and Series A type of investing. So really investing off of business plans and things like that.
Yeah, and just one thing to add here, kind of even before venture funds kind of get to this contact phase, entrepreneurs have been working for countless years before to kind of go from this idea to then creating a company around it, to then making it actually make money, to just growing it to the point where you're ready for your first kind of institutional venture capital dollars. There's so much that goes in from the entrepreneur before this, that it's, and it varies for each individual and for each different sector that you're in. It may be longer, it may be shorter, but this investment period is kind of preceded by a pretty long development from the entrepreneur and from the startup.
That's a really good point. It's a really good point. I'm gonna go in a little bit into the venture deal sourcing. So I kind of talked about this already, and this is just emphasizing some of this work. And I hit on a lot of these points here. So I really want to go into maybe some of deal screening and what people consider through some of this. So these 6 bulleted points here are kind of rough guidelines for what people look for in deals. So one thing that I really emphasize that I think is one of the most important is the early team. So does the founder have a big enough vision to go out and build a company like this? Are they in the right stage or the right industry? And do they have a right addressable market to be tackling? Are there good incumbents in the space for them to find and carve out type of market share in that? A lot of funds also invest off of geography. Some like to stay close to home. There are strategies that you might have heard of around. One fund called Revolution has a Rise of the Rest initiative, where they literally drive a bus around the Midwest and Mountain West regions of underserved capital areas. So secondary and tertiary cities that might have developing startup ecosystems, to go find deals in those areas that people on the coast in New York City and San Francisco already have crazy deal flow that they might not see. So geography is definitely a strategy within venture deal sourcing. Also round dynamics and ownership levels, which we can get into at a later stage. But I wanted to, as we're kind of running up on time here, I wanted to hand off to Francisco to run through kind of our core work is around a lot of due diligence and risk assessment. I've hinted at this before, and so is Francisco. So long relationships, we need to ensure that we are parking our money in the right spots. So yeah.
Absolutely. So if you can go to the next slide here, Ian, kind of this third phase of, from initial contact to rough analysis to then the deep dive into due diligence is a lot of what our work consists of. And basically what we do is, we check strategy, we check historical financial performance, we check business plans. And what that takes is typically a lot of meetings between us and our funds. And then from a venture investor perspective, what it takes is, a lot of meetings between the venture capitalists and the entrepreneurs to make sure that they understand the composition of the team, to make sure that they understand, all of the details of not only the history of the company, but also the development moving forward. So it could be, how does the product work? How is the product different? What prior experience do team members have that are really going to help them build this organization to be something great? So I guess at a very high level and very oversimplified, it's fact checking a lot of the things that you saw in the rough analysis phase, and just really deep diving into what are critical points of knowledge for you. So if you go to the next slide, Ian, just to be sensitive of time here, I think the second piece where it's a summary from Warren Buffett on what the 4 most important steps of diligence are. I really think this summarizes it very well, right? So when you're thinking about as a venture investor, when you're looking at a deal, when you're thinking about it, it's, do I understand this, right? And you don't need to understand every single little intricacy of the technology. You'll build out, a network and have advisors that kind of help you understand that. But from a in-depth, but more so macro level, do I understand where this business and this company will be 10 years from now, right? Does it have some sort of sustainable competitive advantage? How are they better than what's in the market right now? And is it easy to replicate? Can somebody very easily do what they're doing, right? So that's another important piece to understand. Then, as Ian mentioned, just looking at the management team, right? The people that are running this company, the people that you're giving your money to, are they the right people? Do they have the right skill sets? And are they able to build this company moving forward? And do you have an honest and confident relationship with them? It's not just, a relationship where you're building a company and I'm, helping you out. There's a capital exchange. And as Ian mentioned, as fiduciaries, you have the responsibility to make sure that your capital is going to the best people that are going to leverage it to really build their company. And then fourth, is the price right? Each investor has kind of different threshold targets that they're really looking at. And do you think that, the price that you're getting in at will give you room for growth and for you as an investor to make money in the future? This airline captain versus art critic, it's basically, a airline captain kind of flies and lands a plane every single time following a certain set of procedures, right? They've flown over 10,000 hours and they know what works. Versus an art critic, it's gut feel. One art critic could feel a different thing. The kind of systematic approach blended with the art critic approach is what at the end of the day makes great, venture investors and kind of the process that entrepreneurs have to go through. You have to make sure that you can kind of tick and tie all of these boxes of those 4 questions that I ran through. But then you also have to build the relationship with your investor to make sure that they're comfortable and they have confidence in your relationship. So due diligence is really, making sure that you understand the facts, making sure that you're comfortable with the team, and making sure that, you can explain in the best way possible why this is the best use of your money. So Ian, we're bumping up against time there. I want to make sure we leave some time for questions if anyone has any. But you can drop them into the Q&A box here.
And if anyone has any questions and we run over, feel free to email them to me, or I can share Ian and Francisco's emails and you can ask them as well.
Okay.
That's perfect. Yeah. Maybe to summarize, Francisco, we could kind of go through that. So I think really at a core, going into your early stages of your career, just start to think about what you like and what you don't like. Write it down, put together plans, find like-minded people and surround yourself with people that you think you can build with and that you think people could help build you as a person. So I think those are really important aspects as you go out and build a network, build a friendship base, because who you surround yourself with is kind of who you are, and can really help lead to career success as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from a kind of entrepreneur or investor aspirations, keep in mind that, it might not always be your first experience, but that there are tremendous ecosystems being built all around the country to support you. If you want to be an entrepreneur in Cincinnati, there's Centrifuge, there are several venture funds, there are, innovation labs through the universities here, along with, several other people that can kind of mentor you along the way that have been successful in building their own ventures. So as Ian mentioned, make sure that you build the right networks, make sure that you're curating the right experiences, and make sure that you stay, up to date and knowledgeable about the resources and the ecosystem around you, and make sure that you leverage that to kind of drive you towards whatever your end goal is, right? Whether it's being an entrepreneur, an investor, working at a tech company, just make sure that you have the right network, you have the right experiences, and that you're leveraging the resources at hand to make sure that you can get there.
All right, thank you both. I'm going to close this out here since we're a little over on time, but feel free to send me the resources, like the list of resources, and I can send it out to the students along with like the rest of your slides so everyone can look over them and a recorded version of this. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much, Francisco and Ian, for sharing your insights and breaking all of these topics down for us. I loved hearing about how your past experiences prepared you for your roles now and how you showed us the specific ways we can get involved now. The recorded version of the session will be available soon. Students, we love hearing your feedback. Please fill out the quick survey that pops up once you leave this meeting. Please join us at 12 p.m. tomorrow for building a teen tutoring service with Erin and Aiden Finn, 2 high school student entrepreneurs that are a part of this program. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Ian and Francisco.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna.